great to be here. Listening to that, I'm like, wow, I don't really have a focus at all. I'm all over the place. But I'm going to talk today about one of the things that I'm really excited about, and that's simulation-based experiments. Because I'm all over the place, there's a lot of people funding this work. This is some of the work that's being funded that I'll talk about today, including a Gund Institute for the Environment Catalyst Award, looking at COVID-19. So that's pretty fun stuff. So the SEGS lab is the social-ecological gaming and simulation lab. Is a transdisciplinary research lab focused on modeling and simulating social-ecological systems from a complex systems perspective. Not very much jargon there. Basically, what we're trying to do is figure out how people in these complex systems interact with their environment, and how can we change that, and how do we learn about that. So that's pretty complex. It's a big group. Question: how do you study them? How do you study people? I mean, we're pretty complex and messy and ugly in general. So are there ways of getting at all of those things? And the easy answer is no, we should just give it up and go home. But we have to start thinking about what kind of assumptions we're going to make when we're doing these studies. Are we going to assume rationality? A lot of stuff in the past has, and that's probably a little problematic. We make a lot of decisions based on gut reactions, or things that aren't necessarily the right decisions for us at the time. Although maybe some economics theory would argue that we're always making decisions based on an optimal thing for you at the time or something. I don't know. So there are a lot of other things besides rationality that come into play. What about stability versus dynamism? So if I ask you, which of these do you want? Okay, who's going chocolate cake? All right, apple pie? All right. So what if you'd had chocolate cake for the last week, every single night? Can you go? Yes, I did. I'm still going chocolate cake. So okay, all right. So would your decision change at all if you had it just like over and over and over again? What about if it was 9 a.m.? Does it change? I mean, no, it doesn't change. So I feel like I'm more apple pie in the morning if I had to choose. So I mean, these things, when we ask people the questions, it's not just like one answer all the time. It depends on the things that have happened, your experiences. So a lot of the tools that we have out there just give a snapshot, and they just assume that that snapshot is how you feel, how you perceive things. But we know that that changes. We know that experience has changed those things. We've got a lot of different ways to study people. I just love this one. All of them have their problems, including serious games, which I'll be talking about. We really like surveys. We really like focus groups. We really like interviews. We use all of them, but they all have their problems. They all have their biases. So we just have to recognize what those are and how to use them, when to use them. What I'm going to be talking about today primarily is the simulation-based experiments and what we can learn from them. So one of the cool things is that we can actually do experiments, which is really hard with people, but we can actually test decision-making in different contexts. So when we put people into a game treatment, we can actually then modify that treatment and see how people change their responses to different things. We can learn a lot of different types of things. We can learn how people change their experience over time. We can get some of these gut reactions to things, put people under time pressure. And we can look at things from a lot of different angles. And I'll talk about that a little more later. Some people might argue that we can get better data. That's up for debate, whether or not it's actually better data. But one of the things we do to try to increase the effort and increase the salience in these experiments is we pay people. That seems to help. But you even get more money if you do a good job. So when we're paying people and they're like, well, real money's on the line if I make this decision right, or if I change my decision, if I make a mistake, I could lose actual money. It does keep people in and really get them excited about that. And obviously in the lab, we just have so much money, we just make it rain. We don't actually pay people that much. But yeah. So what do these things look like? So generally speaking, we kind of start with a introduction, some slides. We have to go through the IRB protocols. We have some interactive tutorials probably, and then we jump into placing people into some sort of context. So that context can change depending on whatever system you're actually interested in looking at. You know, we've got with Ben is working on a precision ag game right now, looking at AI trust. We've got this one that's looking at biosecurity. We've got a lot of different games. We got a game that just came out looking at flood hazards. We've got all sorts of different things. So we put them in different contexts and we change that context and people change their behavior maybe. Much to I have to sit right in front of you. You were right in front. So we just change the context over and over again, and we see how people change, and we can collect that data. You don't actually have to. So the first game I'm going to talk about today is looking at livestock health, looking at biosecurity, and in this game, we are really interested in people's willingness to, in a sense, do things that would protect the health of their herds, prevent disease from getting into the building. The analogous to washing your hands. In this case, they have to do a lot more than washing their hands. They have to take a shower going in and out. That's what the protocol suggests. Going in to take care of your pigs, you take a shower, change your clothes. And when you leave, you take a shower again and change your clothes. There's a lot of opportunity costs associated with that decision. You know, it takes a long time to do that. So what happens when you just run outside and grab your cell phone, or you run outside and pound on the steel drum that's holding the feed because the feed stopped moving and your pigs are screaming at you? This is actually real world things that we talked about with the people there that actually happened. So there's some costs associated with that decision. And in this game, we're saying you can cheat and go out the side door to get your outside task done, or you can go through this. That's a shower, by the way. This is the waterfall. It's obviously just a shower. It's a pretty heavy shower. Yeah, it's there's limited stuff that we actually had tiles to work with here. But you know, it takes time to go through that door. So we want to see what messages actually influence people to go through one door or the other. In this case, you see that little 15% there. We also said, oh, we'll use a word, or we'll use a graphical display that showed like a threat on infographic. So without changing the risk at all in one of these things, we went from 82% of the people going to the shower to 30% of the people going to the shower. So when we think about that, just by changing the way we were talking about the risk, changing this from a number, 5%, to a threat gauge with a little uncertainty on there. It was like a little arrow going, is like risky, and this is how much risk is there. 82% did the right thing to 30%. A pretty staggering number when you think about that and the possibility of disease transfer. Just the way we started talking about it. So these are some of the low-hanging fruit that we can actually get from these serious games. It's like, which will work better for getting people to do the right thing in different situations. This is like perfect time. The next thing is what Dung did. This is a lot of Dung's work here, where we took that same game and translated it into both Mandarin and Spanish. And this is the results from the Spanish version. When we changed it into Spanish, people changed the way they responded. That could be because of a cultural thing. It could be because there isn't a one-to-one translation between English and Spanish. But if you think about that, we just assume that we'll just like translate these things and people will respond to the messages the same way. He showed that that's not the case. So it's very interesting to see like the context that we put people in changes behavior. And these subtle things can make a big difference in their behavior. It's very cool stuff. Good timing. Another thing that we can look at is risk in different situations. How do people play out with these clusters of risk? And you know, you'll get some people that are very risk tolerant. They'll just like, it doesn't bother me to take a lot of risks. Other people are very risk averse. Other people are in the middle. These people down here, whenever it was risky, they took risks. Whenever it was safe, well, they did the opposite. I can't remember exactly. They did the exact opposite of what they should have done. So it was like, what are you doing? You're spending all your, when it was safe, they spent lots of money on biosecurity, basically. And when it was risky, they spent no money. It's like, we're trying to figure out what to call those people. And in the lab, I think it was like the people that are like, yeah. Anyway, I probably shouldn't say that out loud. But we can use this information to try to test messages and tailor different messages to these risk things. We learned that they play differently in different situations. So we can get a lot of information from how they play all these rounds. So the serious games can allow us to look at distributions of behavior in different contexts, which can allow us to use resources in different ways. We can allocate resources if we know some of that risk. Another one that was really interesting is we actually hired a reporter to develop a couple TV reports. One where he interviewed a farmer that had actually been hit by disease, and all the visceral reactions and how it impacted him personally, impacted his family. His daughter couldn't work in the industry anymore because a lot of animals died and it was traumatizing. And a lot of the, the facts around the disease. And then we took that same interview and just removed all that visceral emotional stuff and just talked about the facts. And then we had a third version where there was no video. And when we actually had that really visceral thing played before the game, we actually saw people spending more money and using more effort in that biosecurity realm. Really cool idea of using this exemplification idea. If the message seems to matter to people, if they understand why it's important, they'll do a better job. So really, really cool stuff on that. So that's a lot of the, I guess I have one more on this this thing. This is a fascinating one. So we're looking at conservation behavior in agriculture and did a lot of things like tiller or buffer strips and irrigation. We also did cover crop looking at soil health. And they would get this eco badge there on the right if they did a good job of putting enough cover crops down. It didn't have any monetary value. It was pretty, but this is in a virtual space. You just get some acknowledgement that you're doing something good. That threshold was varied in a bunch of different versions of the game. And if people played the version where the threshold was that you had to put 50% of your cover crop into, or 50% of your land into cover cropping, that's where this doesn't work. Walk over here, way over here. That's what they did. They put 50% of their cover crop. That was the biggest signal in the game. We had, climate change effects, bigger droughts and floods, all this sort of stuff. The cover crop was the biggest signal that we found in the data. Fascinating, considering there was no monetary reward associated with it. And they literally left money on the table to get that award. If you didn't get the award, you actually made less, or if you didn't get the award, you made more money, and quite a bit more overall across the whole experiment. So it was pretty fascinating. One of the things we were interested in is whether or not that effect would go away. That learning over time is like, well, this isn't getting me anything. And for a lot of them, you see a lot of people using it less and less, getting that award as the game went on. When it was 50%, that award, people just kept doing it. They bought into that idea. So there's something here that we can probably leverage. That acknowledgement of good behavior makes a difference somehow. So this isn't the answer, obviously, and we're just gonna keep looking into those monetary rewards and non-monetary rewards to try to see what's going on. One of the games that we just got data back for is looking at multiple levels of awards. This idea of saturation. So like if everybody's giving out an award, does anybody care anymore, right? And it does look like there's some evidence for this idea of perceived sufficiency. And we'll be hopefully writing that up soon. But the idea is like, if you've done enough, if you bought your electric car, you've done enough for climate change. You don't have to do any more after that. And we're seeing a lot with this game where they reach this certain tier, they put just enough in to reach that tier, and then they don't go anymore. They don't go enough to get to the next tier. So you see these interesting nonlinear signals in the data. So there's a lot in these games that we can learn just from behavioral signals from the games. But we can go even farther than that because we put on surveys before and or after the games that allow us to leverage what we're learning in the game with additional information. So we can ask things like demographic questions or experience questions or other things. Dipping into the gun catalyst work, we developed a game looking at social distancing and behavior in when COVID was just really a crazy thing out there. We didn't know much. We were trying to understand what would influence that behavior. One of the first things we did is ask people a bunch of questions about their perceived safety. How safe or unsafe are the following actions for avoiding exposure to COVID-19? And we asked 17 of these: grocery shopping, going to a party, going to church or religious service. 17 of those questions that allow us to develop an index of how likely it is that you think you're vulnerable to this. Then they had to play this game. In the game, there was a couple things going on. One, they had to get some exercise. The other thing they had to do was get food. And remember, we're paying people real money. So you can either get more points by going to the grocery store, but you risk getting COVID, or you can get your food delivered and you don't get very many points. It costs more to get your food delivered. So, we have these social distancing rules. You're not supposed to be within or close to the people in the store. That increases your chance of getting sick. Kind of crazy because that perceived safety, that index of questions, influence their behavior in the virtual world. So their willingness to go to the store changed based on that perception of how dangerous it was to get COVID. And this is in the virtual world. So, that it's crazy to me to think that. This is how much time they spent around people in the game. So if they didn't think COVID was a risk out here, they spent a lot more time around people than if they thought COVID was a real danger. Pretty strong signal there, and really fascinating, right? That you've got this game, and people in the game are playing like they do, assumedly, in the real world, at least based on their perceptions and how they responded to the survey. With that sort of information, we can then start tailoring our different messages, different ideas to these things based on playing the game and changing the context. So if we change the context and say, okay, it's less risky right now, do they change their behavior? Which messages work to get the people that are breaking all the rules to stop breaking the rules? So really kind of a fascinating thing. We also saw some of this behavior change over time. If they'd gone to the store 100 times and they'd gotten lucky every single time, they're much more likely to go to the store again. So some of these things could be reflected in the real world, right? If you've been lucky over and over again, you kind of perceive that that's not a big deal anymore, that you can do these behaviors again. So we did see that change over time, and we're able to capture that allows us to test different things and gather that sort of data. Experience matters in these situations. So this is another exciting one that hasn't been published yet. And this one, we're looking at food security, and looking at the wicked problem right now. One of the wicked problems that we have is that we get a lot of requests to eat really whole foods, really good, healthy, nutritious foods. And we're asking everybody to do this, and socioeconomically challenged individuals don't have the money, don't have the resources, don't have the access to be able to do that. So we can't just say, okay, yeah, we'll just make the food cheaper. That's the answer, because farmers, small farmers especially, aren't making any money. The average income of a small farmer in America was, Sam, you probably know this better than I do, but I think it was like negative $1,533. That's kind of bad if you're thinking about salaries. So we can't ask the farmers to just pony up and make their food cheaper. So what do we do? In this one, the farmers are the apple farmers, and we had them selling to different markets, and we're putting in different policies to see if we got some influx of money, which would be the best bang for the buck, that sort of thing. Where are they going to sell these things? And after talking to a lot of farmers and a lot of different people in the industry, stakeholders, our technical advisory board, they said, there's also this, I farm because I'm part of a community and I want to, do this other social goods thing. So we're like, well, how do we do that? So we put in this community nourishment score. So if you actually gave money or your food to the food bank, you're getting a lot more food, healthy food to the community, but you're not making any money. If you go to the farmer's market, not much of that food is getting to socially, economically challenged individuals, but you're probably going to make more money. So there's this dynamic here where you can start to see what you're doing for the community. So it's a social good score. And then we have this reinforcement of this social good score. How'd you do? Well, we had two versions of the game. One version of the game where that was all visible, and another version where we hid everything about community nourishment. And then we asked some questions after. And this is, to me, it's just fascinating. We just learned this, but that we asked a Likert scale question. Small farmers are operating a business just like any other business. If they're losing money, they should change their operation practices or get out of business. So on a Likert scale. And the people that actually played the game where they saw the community nourishment were much less supportive of this. than the people that didn't play the same game, but they didn't see the community nourishment. So the experience of playing the game made people more likely to support the idea that farming is more than just a pure economic practice. The game itself changed the perceptions of that idea. It changed the perceptions of their willingness to support different policies. The people that didn't see the community nourishment were less likely to support government incentives, less likely to support wholesalers, giving more money to wholesaler prices, or paying for some of the distribution costs. Is across the board, seeing that difference, that community nourishment, changed their perceptions of being a farmer. I think that's crazy cool. Okay, but there are some problems with serious games. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Cairo project. The Water Institute is right here. Cooperative Institute for Research Operations and Hydrology. Great team, and really exciting work that we're doing. Part of that, and I'm going to lay out some limitations here in a second or two, but the limitations are all on me. The team is great. So, so in this game, we're looking at willingness to evacuate. And basically, we're putting out different flood messages. And in this game, you're like, oh, you get a flood message, a warning message, different types of messages. And is that still going? Looks like it froze.
Is the clicker working anywhere?
Yeah, I think it broke. Oh,
You broke it.
I broke it totally. So in that game, so we put different messages on this virtual phone, and they had to make a decision whether or not they were going to evacuate or not. Pretty simple dynamic. So it's like, okay, there's a major flood coming, and are you going to evacuate or not? There is a warning message out there. It's all text, and it says there's a minor flood. Probably don't need to evacuate. And you still see whether or not they evacuate or not. Oh, is it going to go?
Okay.
Is it going? All right. So this is what's called a flood inundation model. In the future, hopefully soon, we're going to start getting those for this region within the next few days or years. Some of the work that Merrill is doing on the Rob hand, hopefully we'll get in there as well. The height above nearest drainage. Is it height above? Yeah. So you can see that it was really slow. We have a flood come in, they decide whether or not to evacuate. We give it some feedback. Some cool data came back from this, where different messages had different levels of responses on whether or not they responded appropriately to that message. And those messages you changed over time. So there was a trajectory of learning during the game, which is what we want to see. Some of them learned quicker than others, but there are some problems with this. We also did some risk stuff. The people on both ends, the really people that made quick decisions that were really risk averse, and the people that waited a long time and then made a decision, both of those groups did not perform as well as the people that were right in the middle. It's kind of an interesting thing. What I want to point out here on this is that 0.5 is random. If they're evacuating when they're not supposed to and they're just flipping a coin, these people that were risk tolerant are right around random with those risk messages, which is pretty terrifying, really. That they get the risk message and like, flip a coin whether or not I'll evacuate or not. So half the time they were doing it right and half the time they weren't. It's kind of scary. So the problem is this. when we created the game, I wanted to make it so that there was tons of pressure on them to make a quick, good decision. And I think I made it so that there was too much pressure. Because we had tons of people that were just like, evacuate, evacuate, without actually looking at the message at all. Or I'm never gonna evacuate. I don't know what's going on. I'm not gonna evacuate the entire game. So we saw, you know, regardless of the message, that it's like, okay, well, there's a major flood coming and you can see that you're flooded. They never even saw the message because they'd already done something. That's the majority. Over 60% of the people did not make informed decisions. Of 1,000 people that did this experiment, we had over 600 people that were like, nope, I'm not doing this. And so that's largely on me because I created this game with the help of the team, but I was like, okay, we need to make it really, you know, this visceral, like you're in there, you're the flood's coming, you have to make a decision now. And so there are real limitations to experiments. These type of experiments. The user interface, the things that those people use and see and experience make a big difference on the data that you collect. So we have to make sure that when we're designing these things, and we're collecting data in all these places, 4 minutes. That we do a really good job and we vet it and we do this. We're trying to really force this through pretty quickly. And it's probably my fault. Like, actually, maybe it's my suit's fault.
Did the player just ran out of time default no evacuation?
So yes. So if they didn't press anything, they didn't evacuate. So that they had a choice to press the evacuate button or not. So we're actually in the process of creating a version 1.5 where there's 2 buttons, evacuate or prepare at home. We're taking off a lot of the front end pressure so that in this game, the evacuation costs instantly started going up. The longer you took to evacuate, the more it would cost you. And we're gonna say, okay, you can wait 5 seconds before pressing a button, it won't make a difference. And we're gonna take off that pressure, add a little more feedback to tell people that was a good decision or a bad decision after every single round. And hopefully when we run this experiment again, we'll get a much better data. Okay, time here. So in general, there's a lot we can learn from these experimental games, these serious games. Most of the stuff I've just discussed, there's value, scientific value directly in all those game data. We also like to triangulate those with survey data, focus groups, interviews, because all those pieces can tell us different things about the people. And if we use all those data together, it can really help us. We can also take those data and put them into more complex systems models, like an agent-based model that describes the supply chain and has some human components to it. And then we can take those data and try to understand if we change things in the system to reflect some of the, you know, the risk spectrum or different messaging, that we can change, you know, the magnitude of different events, the magnitude of a disease outbreak or something in the system. And then we can, you know, model this to see what actually aligns with what we've observed as far as these things, go back and forth and try to fit the models with that human behavioral component, knowing that that human behavioral component is, in a way, it's a flexible thing. We can change that by different nudges. And so if we can say, okay, well, it aligns, what we saw before aligns really well with this sort of thing. If we change it to this other thing, this is what we might get from the system. So we just have to figure out how to get it from point A to point B. So with this methodology grouping where we have like the surveys and the serious games and focus groups and interviews, and putting them in with modeling and theory, it gives us a really powerful set of tools to use to try to understand how human behaviors influence these different social ecological systems. And that is